Hello and welcome everyone to the Friday stream. I am Brigantia Blackbird of the Blackbird Grimoire. I hope everyone is doing well. And if you're having a sudden shift in weather like I just have, I hope you are coping very well. For the past couple of weeks, I have had exquisite spring-like weather. I have half expected to see the flowers to pop up a little early. And then this morning, what do I have? Snow. So it's back to cozy flannels, fuzzy socks, and lots of hot cocoa. That's February for you. So today's stream is actually a stream that was voted upon on my Twitter page. I will periodically put those up. So if you're interested when I put up other polls, whether it's for choosing video subjects or just to get people's general opinions on different things, definitely follow me on Twitter. But today, our topic at hand is a Witchcentricity episode, and it's all about finding your feet. Specifically, how long does it take to actually grasp the fundamentals of witchcraft? And this is an important question for people because when you first begin your studies, it's very easy to become completely. There's so much to think about and to digest, and the idea that you could ever really come to grips with it, or this suddenly all just becomes normal and just part of the state of your knowledge and things that you do, it can seem like a very far off date. And sometimes people get discouraged and they say, "How well, I don't know if I really want to start." So I hope today will be of an encouragement to people to go ahead, take the plunge, and to understand that you can get a grasp of the essentials in a relatively quick period of time. Also, because I'm streaming from StreamYard today, if I see you comment, I will be able to post it on the screen, which I think always makes a better experience for everyone because we can have more back and forth, especially with this particular topic. I think there's a lot of room, so please don't be bashful. Let us begin. So, in order for us to form an estimation of how long it might take for someone to get a grasp of the fundamentals of witchcraft, I think we first have to define what those fundamentals actually are. One of the persistent problems that I see with people who are interested in witchcraft is they don't necessarily have a very organized approach. So, I hope today we will help at least give people a framework to attempt to see if that helps them with their studies. There's also factors to take into account, for instance, how much time does someone have available to them to study and actually apply what they're doing? And I'm talking about realistically, not how much time you would like to have, how much time you hope you have if you get maximum cooperation and you're really, really lucky. I'm talking about what time can you actually count on. That's going to be the number you should actually be looking at. Then there's also the issue of the quality of your note taking. Are you able to take notes that are meaningful to you later on that call to mind more details in what you've been studying? Also, your memory capacity. That's always been one of my major hangups. I have to use information constantly, otherwise, I'm not going to remember. Tell you what, once the senility and the dementia hits an old age, it's going to be a wild time. Also, other things that affect your development and being able to get things is whether or not you are asking pertinent questions of yourself, of other people in the witchcraft community that you might be in communication with. Are you asking the questions and trying to come to grips with something? Also, are you seeking guidance from experienced and sensible, I must stress sensible practitioners? There's a lot of people who have managed to have an encyclopedic grasp of knowledge, but they are significantly lacking in practice and in wisdom. So it's best to try to find people who have a nice balance of the two. Then, of course, there's your own personal critical thinking skills. Now, as you study and you practice more, your critical thinking skills will improve if you are putting the work in. But that's another factor that is very much under your own control. And then, finally, another factor that will affect whether you progress or whether you don't will be how successful you are in eliminating distractions. Not everything that is present in our lives is serving much of a purpose. It's not necessarily essential. It's not even necessarily stuff that we enjoy. So learning to buy out the time and be able to set aside and say, no, for this period of time on this particular day, the outside world is just going to have to look after itself. I'm not going to have distractions. I'm not turning on the TV or the internet or doing anything else. I'm just focusing on what I'm doing. So if you can learn enough self-discipline to do that, you will have greater success for sure. So What is witchcraft? That's the beginning of every Witchcraft 101 book ever. To answer that question, we will apply the essential questions that used to be common in journalism: who, what, where, when, why, and how. This will not only help us answer the question of what witchcraft is, but it also helps breaks down the answer into more manageable, digestible chunks. Instead of having to tackle everything all at once, you can focus on particular areas, beginning with the who. That's you. Where do you fit in with all of this? The why, your personal motivation, as well as the why of witchcraft. What is the purpose of witchcraft? Then the what, various fields of study under the umbrella of witchcraft, because it is made up of a myriad of different disciplines. Then the how, that would be methods of application. The where, locations of practice, and the when, that has to do with magical timing and events. So, beginning with the who, because let's be honest, there are probably more permutations of religion than what we could really count, as well as a wide range of magical schools of thought and practices for you to choose from. But you are here. You are in the world of witchcraft, and you are at the very least interested. And to become a witch or a wizard, it isn't simply a matter of accepting a label for something that you do or it being a description of your personal beliefs. It really comes down to the essence of who someone is, because that capability that allows people to practice witchcraft, I do believe that is something that is innate. It is something that's just essentially is part of your factory settings. You are have the ability to wield these creative forces of the universe, which is what magic is. It is an energy. It is part of the natural order. Being able to use them and to create effect with them, that's just part of your wiring, and it's just a question of whether or not you are successful in developing it. And I think honestly that someone who is called to witchcraft, that is essentially a person who could never be anything else. Whatever else they might be in this world, whatever else they might achieve and do, the core of who their identity is really is being that witch or that wizard. And I think that's very much what divides the seekers from the practitioners. The seekers, they still have that question in that their mind, not just can they do this, but is this who they are? Whereas the practitioners, those questions have been resolved and they're just getting on with their work. Next, the why. Your motivation, that is at the root of why you want to explore and practice witchcraft, will determine whether you succeed or fail and to what degree in either direction. Sometimes in witchcraft, we refer to the great work. And what that great work actually is self transformation. As much as we're wielding these energies and we're having impacts on other people and our environment, that great work that is actually the core of what we do is that self transformation, shedding illusions, getting rid of our masks, getting rid of anything that is contradictory within us until we are fully and completely integrated in and of ourselves, and we're able to work with great focus to achieve our purposes in life. And this is integrity, and it is necessary for anyone to grow into their full potential, but particularly necessary in witchcraft. We just cannot afford the lies that so many people tell themselves. Now, the why of witchcraft itself is to be a bridge between the seen and the unseen in order to gain and bestow wisdom, and as a tool to heighten the odds of success, to achieve one's aims, and to be an instrument in the service of the divine for the betterment of all humankind. It sounds a bit grandiose, but that is really what it is. This is a role of service, and there's a sense of duty, and that's what differentiates, well, one of the many things that differentiates witchcraft from other magical disciplines. Other magical disciplines, it's a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more, I'm learning about magic in order to produce an effect, accomplish a task, achieve a goal, that sort of thing. There isn't necessarily that spiritual component, and it is that sense of spiritual connectivity, whether or not the practitioner is particularly religious or has any strong connection with the deity. It is that sense of spirituality in and of itself at the core of the practice is what makes it different. Now, the what? Fields of study, I've got quite a list for you. um, but don't be intimidated. Every single witch who has ever been successful in realizing their potential and becoming what they are, they have all gone through these things. You have this field of astrology, divination, the mundane and magical aspects of naturalism, study of plants, animals, mineral, metals, anything that is within the physical world. We have, of course, the elements, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. Sources of power, divine power, natural power, which would be the ambient powers and magical properties of the physical universe, as well as your own personal power. What is your well, and how well are you able to tap into that? That is your personal power. We have polaric energies, order and chaos, the masculine and the feminine, and as well as other polarities. I don't want to get too sidetracked off of that because we do have a list here. Philosophy and ethics. Those are always questions that come up, and some of the most ferocious arguments in witchcraft have been on those topics. Symbolism, a very deep-rooted study of symbolism. Folk wisdom, mythology and deities, cosmology, psychic development, the history, not only of witchcraft, but paganism in general, and how it fits into the larger history and story of humankind. Your chakras, your meridians, auras, these are all forms of personal energy and how to work with them. Those are different modalities of that. Then we have magical jargon or terminology. And then, of course, the beliefs within the craft, which there's a lot involved in that. But that gives you a lowdown. And if you are our student right now, what I would encourage you is take a screenshot of this list or jot it down in your notebook. Feel free to pause the video at any time and do that. That way, you can essentially use this as a way to divide up chunks. Okay, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to look into that, and going through these things, not necessarily one after the other, but seeing that this is something that you are gradually collecting your own collection of notes and thoughts about. So the how we do this would involve our magical tools and alternatives to their tools. You can produce magical effect without having any alter tools at your disposal whatsoever. So do not be held back. Also, methods of spell work. A couple examples: those would be candle magic, poppet magic. Using jars, oils, potions, elixirs, crystal grids, herbal sachets. Our ability to create something for magical purpose is honestly just limited by our imagination. Some of the things that have been mentioned here, these are just the more common modalities that you will see. And of course, meditation, pathwork, and trance, chanting, song, music, dream work, cleansings, healing, protection and banishment, circle castings, and then also what I would call plugging in, as opposed to a circle casting in which you're erecting this essentially this energetic temple and having everything build up and work within that framework. When you're plugging in, it's more so if you're getting into the natural energies yourself, and you're joining that network of energetic pathways throughout the world. Different thing, both can be used to produce magical effect and for magical purposes. Grounding and centering, energy manipulation exercises, shielding, protection that we do for ourselves and our homes, rituals of all sorts for all sorts of reasons. And then, of course, there's our methods of divination, our tarot, runes, ogham, scrying, numerology, and more. And of course, sigils. These are the how that we do our things. Now, the where. Now, the location of magical practices, it's more a matter of our choices and what's practical for us, what's available, than any particular prescription for what ought to be done and where you ought to be doing it. It's nothing so heavy handed as that. Of course, if we have it available to us and we're able to access it, historical holy sites, or as in the case with most of us here in America, local sites that just have that vibe. I've mentioned Cave Hollow, that's very nearby to where I live. That whole park very much has the vibe that is just very suitable for magical practices and for ritual. Of course, it's a public place, so you don't want to make too much of a spectacle and make other people feel uncomfortable, because a lot of times people in these beauty spots where we might practice, they're just there to admire the scenery. They're not really there to get caught up in any sort of religious rituals. So, of course, exercising discernment, but these are places where we can go if available. And then, of course, our homes, indoors and outdoor spaces. We can absolutely get it all done where we live. Now, it is very convenient for most pagans to have a home altar for daily practices. Uh, just for little tiny little bits of recognition and honorings that we might do on a daily basis. But it's also very handy to have that set up, if even if you are accustomed to working outside. What if the weather is really nasty, it's freezing cold, or the rain is pouring down? I mean, and not only would it not be good for you to be out there at all, especially if the trees get to dancing a little bit too much, things could be falling. But also, good luck lighting candles and having them not be put out, or create other problems when the weather gets nasty. There's a lot of reasons why perhaps we might have to move our activities indoor, and it's just good to already have that spiritual hub. And of course, if you are unable to travel to a particular place, I mean, economic realities, they are what they are for all of us. And while there's many places that, are within driving distance, we don't necessarily always have the gas money to go out and do that. So if we're not really able to get out to what would be our perfect ideal local space, having the space at home is just a good idea. And of course, for any holy spot to be fit for purpose, it needs to be clean and tidy. Of course, in the outdoor world, what clean and tidy means will be a little bit different than what it means in your home. So exercise discernment and good judgment, but it also needs to be energetically cleansed, and it needs to be a place where you won't be disrupted. Next, the win. We have everyday witchcraft, special occasion witchcraft, and then important rites of passages, and of course holidays, but we'll get into that a bit later. Everyday craft can basically broke out down and into various magical tasks that we perform seasonally, monthly, weekly, or daily. Everything will fall underneath those categories. And for special occasions, of course, that's defined by our sabbats of the wheel of the year, and of course our lunar spots. Those are most of our ongoing special occasions. And then, of course, we have rites of passage. Rites of passage are performed when and as needed, often when entering a new life stage, or if you are in a new stage of your spiritual development. Life stages where you might be a direct participant, or whether you might be helping perform the rituals themselves, would be births, coming of age, marriages, divorces, when someone becomes a parent, when they become an elder, funerary rites, that sort of thing. Every major milestone of human life, that is an occasion, of course, where we can bring in some ritual and magical practice. Now, spiritual stages of development. So, of course, when you become fully dedicated to your path. Another example would be if you come into special relationship with a particular deity, or if you are taking on a different role. There's all sorts of things that'll be significant moments and chapters in our spiritual lives that we may want to address with a little bit of ceremony. So, obviously, with all of these things in mind, and again, stop at any time if any of these lists are useful to you, take screenshots, all the things. But finding your feet is not going to be an overnight, automatic, instinctive process. But neither does any of this take a lifetime just to get the gist. It's just about really getting started. And I want to contrast with finding your feet with becoming an adept, because becoming an adept, that is the pursuit of a lifetime. That is, the craft has become your way of life. You've been learning, you've got all these decades of experience behind you. That is the pathway of the adept. But getting the gist of the craft can be reasonably achieved within 1 year. What a student does next after that will determine how much progress they make. Now, you might have said a year, Brigantia, really, a year. But I want to reassure you that that timeline is not as daunting as what it might first appear. Now, the goal when you are understanding the fundamentals and beginning to practice is just to what are the basics? And also, it's about not having every possible scrap of information. It's not having this completely polished, sophisticated ritual system. It's not about allowing the perfect to become the enemy of the good. It's just about getting, this is the basic kindergarten level of what the craft is. And a year, of course, is a full cycle. And when you go through your practice for a year, no matter when that year you start, it will take you through the entire wheel of the year. And as you are going through that and growing through that and looking at these landmarks of the year through slightly different eyes, more spiritual eyes, that gives you a snapshot of the bigger magical picture. It also takes you essentially in the course of a year, the symbolic course of the physical human lifetime. And then on the flip side of that, the ongoing nature of it, that is gives you a sense of what it is to be an eternal being, which all of us does have a part of us that is eternal. Because the flesh grows weak, grows old, it dies, but the spirit goes on, and in due course it gets reincarnated once again. And so our mythology surrounding the wheel of the year in and of itself, it has a lot to teach us about that, a lot for us to contemplate and explore. And then, of course, year by year as you go on, you add more layers to your practice. You have more nuance. Your understanding of things deepens. So but it all starts with just getting those basic building blocks, and then you go on from there to actually pursue excellence. Now, to make your life easier, because it was, I mean, well, gosh, it has been a decade. It has been a decade since I got my start, but I still remember that sense of paralysis when I first got started, just not sure how I would ever learn all this stuff, let alone put it all together. But to make your life easier, become a good note taker, get organized, and understand that gradual progress will be your very best friend. I recommend getting a three-ring binder, dividers that you can put labels on so they can be divided by subject, and plenty of paper. And of course, lots of pens. All this goes a long way to you not only being able to take all the notes you could possibly need, but it also helps ensure that they're easily accessible for later review and you are already in the process of getting them organized. So as your thoughts become more cohesive and more streamlined, you'll be able to update that. And of course, that helps build your grimoire. Also, I would recommend keeping a journal where you can unload on both your successes and your woes as you are going through this process. Sometimes you just need to let those words spill out onto the page. It does wonders to help with your stress levels. But also, as you look back, this helps you keep in mind about where you were. And this can be very helpful if you ever become a teacher, because having gone through this psychological evolution, that helps you have a little bit more empathy for someone who might be coming to you for instruction. And of course, another tip is to not tackle everything all at once, all in one day. That is the pathway to madness. It's much more productive just to focus on one topic at a time. I mean, you might say, on Mondays I'll read something about astrology, or I'll try to do a little exercise figuring out something about that. Then on Wednesdays I'll do some divination, and then on Saturdays I'll study about the next holiday and the wheel of the year, things like that. Just do it bit by bit. It all gradually adds up. And then the next thing you know, you've got this kind of big picture view of essentially what the craft is. And then you're going in and putting in more details. Also, schedule breaks for yourself. Your brain will, from time to time, just need a breather. Allow yourself to digest what you have learned, and that's another reason for taking breaks and for just giving yourself a brain break, and also in a heartbreak. As you are not heartbreak, but a break for your heart, because as you are going through all these everything to learn, and as you are growing in your meditation practice and everything else, it can stir up a lot of emotions, especially if you start working with things like your chakras and getting those brought back to a state of health. It can just stir up a lot, and sometimes you need a minute just to, I don't want to say brace for it, but to become accustomed to it, to be able, because there may be some upsets before you're able to smooth down your feathers again. Also, keep in mind that practicing witchcraft, it isn't this contest about who has the best memorization skills. I know there are assholes out there who will make it seem like that, but try to see them for what they are. Assholes who are trying to impress and intimidate people without really having anything of substance to show for it. So they might be handy dandy if you have forgotten something, you just need a quick reminder. But when it comes to wisdom and practice, they're probably not going to be your best resources. Of course, also make the gods, the spirits, and your ancestors you connect with to become a source of comfort and strength. You are building relationships here. And as those relationships build up, don't be afraid to become more emotionally invested in them, because, as you are going through, whether you're having an easy time of it or whether you're experiencing difficulties of it, not only do the god spirits and ancestors have things to teach you, they can also help you cope when it just gets a bit much, which sometimes, even when things are going well, it's just a lot. So as you're getting accustomed to that and you're growing in your own personal strength, they can be very helpful. And then, of course, be true to yourself. Exploring witchcraft, it is about discovery. Success is about finding where you belong. It's not about graduating from which school. It's a question of, is witchcraft your spiritual home? It may not be. And it isn't a failure to walk away from something that just isn't right for you, because there's nothing worse than slogging away at a spiritual practice that is not reflective of who you are. It does not serve your needs. It's not helping you attain anything you want, and it's out of alignment with your actual purpose in life. And then, by contrast, there's nothing more rewarding than when you do find that spiritual home, when you put down your roots, when you're able to work towards achieving your potential. The only question in your discovery of witchcraft is this right for you? Because whatever the answer to that question is, then that's the answer you need to pursue. If it's yes, then go full steam ahead, lots of gusto, become everything you could possibly be. If it is not, then fine. You've learned a great deal. It's not a mistake to have this information at your disposal, and maybe it will help point you direct in the right direction for the next chapter in your spiritual explorations. So it's never wasted. It's only wasted if this isn't for you, and then you stick with it anyway. Yeah, don't. There's going to be enough suffering in your life. You don't need to manufacture it. That's all I'm saying. Now, don't worry. There are some things definitely not to worry about. The first thing I would suggest not worrying about is, what kind of witch am I? Because I've seen a lot of people who are in the first flush. They've realized that there are real life witches. They might be able to be one of them. And their first question is, what kind of witch am I? Don't. The further you go on in your study, the more you realize that most of the differences between the kinds of witches is pure semantics. The practice of witchcraft is in that utilization of the creative forces of the energy of the universe. You got to bear in mind, these are natural energies. They are subject to natural law. They're going to function in a certain way, and a lot of times, the question of what's right or what's a wrong way to do about it. It's, was it successful? Did it work? If it worked, then you're you're working in harmony with the natural law. If it failed, that's when you have to start troubleshooting and say, okay, was this a me issue, or am I trying to do something that is not actually in harmony with that natural law? But as far as, white witches versus gray witches versus green versus Wiccans versus traditional and all these very things, these are primarily just differences of philosophy. And usually it's teensy weensy petty shit that makes the difference between what kind of witch you're not. And then there's this whole business of, oh, I'm a fire witch or a candle witch, or referring to some kind of modality of magic. No matter what modality of magic that you tend to favor, that does not actually constitute a separate discipline of witchcraft. It's just a means to an end. It doesn't render you incapable of performing any other kind of spell. It just means that that's a comfort zone, and there's nothing wrong with having a comfort zone. But to say that that's just essentially all that you are, I mean, no. Any practitioner, they are more than that. And then, of course, there's the whole sea witch, mountain witch, forest witch, all this and that. Those are referring to locations. And I would suggest not referring to yourself as a sea witch if you live in Kansas, or a mountain witch if you live in a valley, or a forest witch if you live on the plains. It's just a little bit silly. You might love those places. You might feel magically enthused when you're in those places, but they're not where you're practicing. So if you decide to label yourself more so by location, make sure it's the location you're actually at. Otherwise, you didn't do tend to expose yourself to ridicule, and you can't blame other people for noticing the contradiction. You're the one who presented that to the world. The world just found it funny. Now, another thing not to worry about is the degree of talent which you possess. That also seems to be something people worry about. Either they're worried that they don't have enough juice to do the stuff, or they have convinced themselves that they are prodigies, the likes of which the world has never seen. Very seldom is either extreme the case. But even in the case of those extremes, the challenge is to develop what you possess. Whether your potential is modest or whether you have a great deal of potential, the only thing that matters is, are you making use of what you have? That's a challenge. You are not in competition with anyone else. This is just a question of, can you use what nature and the gods saw fit to provide you with? Another thing not to concern yourself with too much is specialization. If you decide to focus more so on healing or divination or teaching or spell work, or whatever else that it is, that's something that will develop and gradually, naturally. It comes later on down the road, and it isn't necessarily static. Sometimes there are chapters that you go through in your practice where you're really focused on this one thing, and then you're in a different chapter. Your life changes, and you're into something else. So don't feel like that you have to specialize. Don't feel like you don't have to. Just allow it to evolve as it should. You'll be much happier, I promise. Another thing not to worry about is the controversies within the craft. It's fine, and I think it's useful to understand what the debates are. I think it's very useful to invite people to give you their side of the argument, just so you can understand it. But do not feel pressured to take a side, particularly not when you're in your early studies, because after hearing the arguments, after thinking about the questions long and hard yourself, after having some experience, you may eventually conclude that you actually disagree with everybody. You think everybody's on the wrong track. You have your own idea. So don't feel like that you have to put on some sort of team jersey in these various controversies. People think what they're going to think. You will eventually think what you think, but you don't have to decide that right away. It's perfectly fine. And I would actually encourage it because I think it's healthy. It's fine to be able to entertain an idea without accepting it, as Aristotle used to encourage people to do. Just kind of look at the ideas, turn them inside out, think about what they mean when they're put into practice, examine them. You don't have to pass judgment on them, you just have to think about them, play them out. Also, don't worry about being behind because nearly everyone who was not raised in the craft, they pretty much wish that they had begun at an earlier stage of life than they did. They wish they knew more. They wish they had more experience. They're worried about. Well, they're worried about letting the side down. They're worried about letting themselves down. They're worried about it being too late and all of these other things. But again, this isn't a race. The circumstances of your life, they've come about for a reason. And the only thing that any of us has under our control is the choices that we're making in the present time. So if you are concerned about it, just commit, be regular and consistent in your studies, and put what you learn into practice as you go along, um, and just go through the process. You won't always feel as hopelessly behind and as unknowledgeable as you do in the beginning. That always passes. So, last but not least, enjoy the journey. And I want to leave you with one final thought. It's a Celtic triad. I actually quoted it in a live stream, I think a couple days ago, but it's worth repeating here because I think it will really help as you're kind of building up your own witchcraft practice. It says, the three foundations of spirituality: hearth as altar, work as worship, service as sacrament. As you learn more and as you apply more, you'll see just how all encompassing witchcraft really is. There's a reason why you will hear people refer to it as a way of life, because it becomes your way of life. Not overnight, not automatically, but gradually, piece by piece, over time, it encompasses everything. And that's why I say the people who make it long term in witchcraft, they're the people who they can't not. You could take away all their tools, all their books. You could drop them in the middle of nowhere, and they are still going to be thinking and functioning like practitioners of the craft. They will be interacting with their environments in that way. They will be perceiving the energies. They will be wielding the energies around them. It's just who and what they are. And maybe if you're watching this, that will ultimately prove to be you. But you can't know unless you go through the process. So I wish you the very best of luck with that. Thank you ever so much for joining me and for taking what I have to say into consideration. If you have any comments or questions, you can feel free to leave them for me in the comments section or email me at brigantiablackbird@protonmail.com. I'd be happy to get a little bit more in depth with you there if you would care to. But I think that'll do it for now. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a fabulous weekend. I'll see you guys hopefully Monday. Bye bye.